Hello my friends, let's talk about NieR Automata. I finally got around to playing the DLC, which is something I normally never bother with. But NieR is a very important game to me, my favorite game series of all time, so I bought the DLC firstly because I wanted to see the content before the Let's Players I'm watching get to it, and secondly to support the existence of this game. What I was expecting were a few arena fights ending in the rumored battles against enemies that represent the developers of the game, and what I received was yet another intuitive narrative that betrays its depth. I am obviously going to be talking about big spoilers from here on out, so you're on notice. For these side stories, the game's question of whether the machines have emotions, intelligence, or lives of their own are settled as an obvious yes. So instead, they are focusing on a few isolated social developments among the machine societies and the android resistance group. The first of the three arenas is found in the desert, where the machines have modeled their society after Facade, the city of laws from the first NieR. They don the clothes of the ancient civilization and have developed for themselves an overly complex system of thousands of rules to dictate the course of their operations. For these machines, the rules represent a wide array of situations, from offering a solution to a problem to giving an inspirational metaphor to affect some kind of confidence in themselves. Their goal is to bring about self-improvement by expanding their rule sets and achieving a kind of machine virtue. And in this context, it feels far more appropriate for a group of machines to operate on a complex system of logical schemes than it was for a group of humans in the original NieR. For the player, the arena forces you to avoid using certain functions or taking certain actions in each fight. From simple challenges like don't use your pod bullets and don't evade, to unfair rules like don't let your feet touch the ground. The game causes you to experience the goal of these machines by improving your skills as a player by means of limiting your options, limiting your freedom as a player, continuing the ludonarrative resonance that makes me love these games so much. When you finish these challenges, you are named their new king, and the receptionist machine delivers the same line that Fira gives us in Facade. Rules are not meant to bind us, but to make us free. Yet also warned us not to be too much of a stickler for the rules, because it is rumored that such inflexibility was Facade's ultimate downfall. For more on that topic, you'll have to watch my videos on the philosophy of NieR. But as we ride the elevator up and out of the area, we are shown a scene of a machine's memory of being bound by these rules without end. The next arena we can access is on the shore of the Sunken city. This arena is run by androids of the resistance camp. The androids here have enslaved a large number of machines for the sake of pitting them against each other or against androids who want to have a little fun. When the machines aren't fighting, the androids spend their time torturing the machines, making false promises of freedom, and experimenting on them to make their slave machines more effective in the arena. The machines beg for their lives, and the androids scoff at how stupid the machines are for thinking that they are alive when they aren't. These androids don't recognize the life, the autonomy of these machines because of the hatred formed from years of war. After you complete the challenges and leave the arena, we see another scene of a machine's memory. This one expounds on how making bonds of friendship leads to making enemies out of others. To give one person special treatment means to withhold that treatment from other people, and thus this phenomenon of friendship is the ultimate foundation of the emotion of discrimination. Now, I took a small issue with calling discrimination as a distinct emotion because it is normally and correctly, in my opinion, talked about in terms of being a cognitive faculty. However, what we refer to as discrimination in the sense of a social phenomenon is not just the use of the cognitive faculty, but also the addition of fear, hatred, and resentment. Since the machines are used as foils for single, isolated emotions, it makes sense in this context to unify the idea of discrimination in this way. If it is discrimination that allows us to recognize some people as friends on one end and others as enemies, then it is implied that it would be best not to take either position. No friendship and no discrimination. We leave the sunken city seeing these androids as deeply evil and disturbed, but before we can turn our hatred toward them as a unique class, we come to the third and final arena in the Forest Kingdom. This arena is specifically for 9S, as the only way to enter is to hack into a machine body and do battle with other machines. They do so not in accordance with rules or with following a sadistic resentment, but for the pure goal of becoming more powerful. Among these machines is plenty of thumos, the drive for greatness and honor. But there are also machines that don't want to participate in the fighting and yet are still required to. And while they may be pursuing a positive goal, the result and the expression is largely identical to the android's slave trade. As we leave the Forest Kingdom arena, another memory plays of a machine that was forced to continually fight and grow stronger, but its pursuit is ceaseless. It fights until it ultimately breaks down. So here we have 3 arenas and 3 distinct scenarios. One is about rules and laws, the next is about discrimination and bigotry, and the last is about improvement and the pursuit of power. So what, if anything, do these side stories have in common? Each of these arenas demonstrates a lack of temperance, the virtue of the mean. First, the desert arena challenges you to strictly adhere to a set of rules, then advises you to not be such a stickler and allow the rules to fall away when they keep you from finding your purpose. Second, the sunken city arena warns you against taking strict sides in a conflict, to avoid seeing people as either friends or enemies, and instead treat all people with the same magnanimous sentiment. Third, the Forest Kingdom arena has us pursuing a very specific purpose, the goal of getting stronger, but being so obsessed with it that the end result is total self-destruction, single-mindedly pursuing one virtue without cultivating the others, resulting in ultimately achieving none of them. The virtue of the mean is the ethical philosophy of Aristotle presented in his essay The Nicomachean Ethics, which was written for his nephew Nicomachus as a sort of birthday present when he was coming of age. In it, Aristotle describes that for any given character trait, a person can have it in excess or be lacking in it. For example, courage can be considered a virtue. If a person is courageous, then they will be able to make good and just decisions in situations where courage is required. But if you are lacking in courage, then you will be fearful and cowardly, running from challenges that you ought to face. An excess of courage, however, and you will be brash and reckless. You will create more risk than there is reward and cause more trouble for the people around you. As an individual ethic, a tool for trying to discern right from wrong, this concept is intuitive and pretty functional. But as ethics continued to develop and become more external during the Latin Renaissance, particularly with the invention of human rights, it became easier to scrutinize. For example, if virtue is finding the balance between two extremes, but you don't have an account for how to determine what positions are extreme, then you can label any idea, political question, or ethical rule as being one of those extremes, and thus inch the more reasonable middle point toward an extreme ideology and away from a truly balanced approach. Still, as an individual, the virtue of the mean provides a good foil that motivates a person to strive for temperance by patiently considering all of your options and finding compromise. NieR Automata affords us the opportunity to experience the perspective of a machine trying to do just that in a world overpopulated by extremists. After the final arena, we receive a mysterious message and go to meet this machine who has been sending us its memories. Its name is Plato 1728, a machine that operated in the earlier parts of the machine-android war. Plato 1728 is beaten and broken and ridiculed for being stupid, irrational, and incapable, but still never allowed to slow down, never allowed to remove itself from the war effort, and never decommissioned. The machine life forms tend to become hyper-focused, obsessed with a specific idea or object in order to cope with the experience of life in this world. And for Plato 1728, this was a small ceramic doll that he found left behind by the humans. This doll had no purpose but to give Plato 1728 some solace. But the doll was broken during a battle, and Plato 1728 went mad. It chose to no longer strive for balance. It could no longer strive to temper life with love and compassion in this world of extremists as the norm. So it snapped and went on a rampage, destroying dozens of machines and androids before ultimately being destroyed itself. Though not entirely, because Plato 1728's consciousness, its memory files, were maintained and connected to an old server. The machine network, not knowing why Plato 1728 suddenly went crazy, created a policy to destroy every doll they find in every way they can. And the memories of Plato 1728 are forced to watch this process as it goes on for eternity, goes on with impunity. When Plato 1728 entered the scene, I became very excited and was expecting a lot more philosophical ground to be covered. Plato 1728 joins the game as one of very few essentialist philosophers being showcased. Essentialists, which make up the majority of philosophers, by the way, hold that meaning and purpose can exist as something real in the world, whereas existentialists argue that such does not exist and that meaning either can or cannot be created. For Plato, however, the virtue of the mean is a very prominent part of his philosophy. When you think about Plato, either the theory of forms or his idea of the philosopher king or the Callipolis of the Republic come to mind. Temperance for Plato is just one of the virtues. It is Aristotle that makes temperance, the concept of the mean, ubiquitous to achieving any other sort of virtue. But this confusion of the two philosophers is appropriate in its own way. In the history of philosophy, Plato's work was often attributed to Aristotle in other cultures' academic traditions outside of Greece. For example, in the medieval era of the Islamic kingdoms. And ultimately, it isn't really that big a deal, since the virtue of the mean does play a role in both schools of thought, and that Aristotle is sometimes considered to be expounding on the base idea from Plato, who was his teacher. I find this mixing of Aristotle and Plato even more appropriate in the context of NieR Automata's world, because they have lost so much of human history and are trying to reconstruct it from barely connecting scraps. NieR Automata presents a world where so many people take radical approaches to emotions, to rules, to the pursuit of purpose and meaning, that they grow tired, they lose their way, or they fall into madness. If they could just slow down a bit, apply some temperance, and take the search for meaning a little less seriously, then they would probably have an easier time finding it. Thank you for watching, my friends. It has been so long since I engaged with NieR, and I'm glad to announce that I'm ready to start doing more with it. I have plans for a few more casual style videos for this game that may or may not become full episodes later on, but will be fun to do anyway. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. New videos come out every Saturday, so I hope you will join us next week. We are still a small community, and the only way that we can grow is with your help. Thanks again, and remember, stay true.